What kind of person calls the cops on someone moving into their own home? I hadn't even unpacked my first box when the police cruiser rolled up, its lights flashing silently against the lake's calm shimmer. My name's Lila, and I'd just driven 6 hours with everything I owned crammed into a rickety U-Haul to start over in Willow Lake. A quiet little community I thought would be my sanctuary. The moving truck was still humming behind me, the driver wiping sweat from his brow, when she appeared, HOA Karen, all 300 pounds of her, storming across her pristine lawn like a hurricane in a floral dress. Her voice cut through the humid air, shrill and accusing, demanding to know why I was trespassing on her street. I stood there, keys to my new house dangling in my hand, wondering how a fresh start could go so wrong so fast. The lake, sparkling just beyond the row of manicured yards, seemed to mock the chaos unfolding. I'd bought the little cottage at 67 Willow Lane fair and square, a fixer-upper with a view I'd dreamed of since I was a kid. But Karen, self-appointed queen of the Willow Lake Homeowners Association, had other plans. She didn't even introduce herself, just pointed a manicured finger at me and declared I wasn't approved to move in. Approved? I'd never heard of such a thing. The deed was in my name, the mortgage payments already haunting my bank account. Yet there she was, dialing 911 like I was some criminal, her voice rising with every word, claiming I was violating HOA rules she hadn't bothered to explain. The cop, a tired-looking guy named Officer Daniels, stepped out of his cruiser, glancing between Karen's red-faced tirade and my stunned expression. I tried to explain I'd just closed on the house, had every right to be there, but Karen talked over me, insisting the HOA had veto power over new residents. The driver, a grizzled man named Pete, muttered under his breath about crazy suburbanites and kept unloading my boxes, clearly done with the drama. A small crowd of neighbors started to gather, whispering behind their hands, their eyes darting to Karen like she was a volcano about to erupt. I felt my cheeks burn, not from embarrassment, but from a spark of anger. I'd left a toxic job, a broken relationship, and a city that chewed me up, all for a chance to breathe, to rebuild. And now this woman, this stranger, was trying to gatekeep my new life. Officer Daniels asked for my paperwork, and I handed over the closing documents, my hands shaking but my voice steady. He skimmed them, nodded, and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, she owns the property. There's no law against moving into your own home." Karen's jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing to slits. "This isn't over," she hissed, storming back to her house, her flip-flops slapping the pavement like gunfire. That night, I sat on the floor of my empty living room, surrounded by boxes, the lake's reflection dancing on the bare walls. I should have felt relieved the cop had left. The truck was gone, and I was officially moved in. But Karen's words echoed in my head, "This isn't over." I didn't know then how right she was. The next morning, a thick envelope slid under my door, stuffed with HOA bylaws, every page marked with neon highlighter. A sticky note on top, in Karen's jagged handwriting. Read, comply or face consequences. The rules were absurd. Grass couldn't be taller than 3 inches. No unsightly vehicles in the driveway. No exterior paint without board approval. The final page outlined the HOA's control over the lakefront, a shared community space I'd assumed came with my property. Apparently, Karen's board decided who could access it, and my name wasn't on the list. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. But when I tried to walk down to the lake that afternoon, a neighbor, Tim, a nervous guy with glasses, stopped me. "Karen's watching," he whispered, glancing at her house. She's got cameras. Says you're not allowed near the water until you're vetted. Vetted? I'd bought a house, not applied for a secret society. That's when I started digging. The truth hit me like a slap. Karen wasn't just a busybody. She was a tyrant. I spent hours online, scouring forums and public records. Willow Lake's HOA had been her personal kingdom for a decade. Ever since her husband, a developer, helped build the neighborhood. She'd bullied residents into compliance, fining them for minor infractions, even forcing one family to sell after they painted their mailbox blue. The lake, though, was her crown jewel. Public records showed it was deeded as community property, not HOA controlled. But Karen had convinced everyone otherwise, gatekeeping access to keep her power. The twist came when I found an old post on a neighborhood app, buried in a thread from years ago. A former resident, Mary, claimed Karen had once tried to bribe a county official to rezone the lakefront for private solitaire sale. The deal fell through, but the rumor was enough to make my blood boil. Karen wasn't just controlling. She was corrupt. I printed everything I found, my hands trembling with purpose. This wasn't about my right to the lake Anna Maria, it was about stopping her. I knocked on Tim's door that evening, armed with my research. He hesitated, his eyes darting to Karen's house. But when I showed him the records, his face changed. She told us the lake was HOA property, he said, his voice low. Said we'd lose access if we didn't follow her rules. I asked if he'd help me fight back. Tim nodded, a spark of defiance in his eyes. We rallied 2 more neighbors, Sarah, a single mom tired of Karen's fines, and Mr. Chun, an elderly man who'd been denied lake access for his grandkids. Together, we formed a quiet rebellion, meeting in my garage to plan. We'd confront Karen at the next HOA meeting, scheduled in a week at the community center. The goal wasn't just to expose her, but to dismantle her grip on the neighborhood. I barely slept that week, my dreams filled with Karen's voice, her finger pointing like a weapon. But I wasn't alone anymore. For the first time since I'd arrived, I felt like I belonged. The meeting was a powder keg waiting to ignite. Karen sat at the head of the room, her floral dress swapped for a blazer, her smile as fake as the plastic ferns decorating the table. The room was packed 30 neighbors, some curious, others hostile, all under her spell. I stood up, my heart pounding, and started with the lake. I held up the county deed, my voice steady despite the sweat trickling down my back. This proves the lake is public property, not HOA controlled, I said, passing copies to the crowd. Murmurs rippled through the room. Karen's smile faltered, but she recovered fast, banging her gavel. That's irrelevant, she snapped. The HOA maintains the lake, so we set the rules. That's when I dropped the screenshots of Mary's post about the rezoning scheme. The room went silent, then erupted. Neighbors shouted questions. Karen's face turned purple. Tim stood up, his voice shaking but clear, and told how Karen had fined him for planting a garden she didn't like. Sarah shared how Karen threatened to tow her car for parking wrong. Mr. Chun, his voice quiet but piercing, said he just wanted his grandkids to fish in the lake like he used to. Karen tried to shout us down, but the tide had turned. The neighbors weren't just angry, they were done. The confrontation reached its peak when I asked Karen point blank about the rezoning. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw fear. She stammered, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But the neighbors weren't buying it. Someone yelled, "Vote her out!" And the chant spread. Karen slammed her gavel so hard it cracked. screaming about order. But the room was chaos. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Not triumph, but something heavier, justice. Maybe. We called for an emergency vote to dissolve the HOA's lake authority and remove Karen as president. The motion passed. 22-8. Karen stood frozen, her empire crumbling as neighbors cheered. But then came the twist none of us expected. Tim, pale as a ghost, pulled me aside after the meeting. Lila, there's something else, he whispered. He'd found an email on the HOA server. Karen had been skimming dues for years, funneling them into a personal account. It wasn't just about the lake. She'd been stealing from us all. The revelation hit like a punch, turning our victory bittersweet. We'd won the battle, but the betrayal cut deeper than we'd imagined. Karen's downfall was swift and brutal. The next day, we filed a formal complaint with the county, attaching the email evidence. The investigation was quick. Karen's records were sloppy, her arrogance her undoing. The HOA was audited, and the lakefront was officially declared public property. Karen was removed as president, and the board issued a public apology. She didn't go quietly, of course. For weeks, she lurked in her house, her curtains twitching, her car rarely moving. Rumors spread that she was selling, unable to face the neighbors she'd ruled. One morning, I saw a for sale sign in her yard, and I felt a pang not of pity, but of closure. The lake, once her weapon, was now everyone's again. Kids splashed in the shallows. Mr. Chin fished with his grandkids, and Sarah hosted a barbecue on the shore. I watched from my porch. My cottage no longer just a house, but a home. The HOA tried to regroup, but without Karen's iron grip. It was just a group of neighbors trying to coexist, not control. Looking back, I realized Willow Lake wasn't just a place, it was a lesson. I came here to escape, to hide from a world that felt too big, too cruel. But running doesn't fix you. Standing up does. Karen thought she could break me, scare me into submission like she had so many others. But she didn't count on the neighbors she'd silenced for years finding their voices, or the new girl with nothing to lose and everything to prove. The lake sparkles now, free from her shadow, and every ripple feels like a small victory. We don't have all the answers. HOAs can still be a pain, and neighbors still bicker, but we're learning to listen, to share, to rebuild. I walk to the lake every morning, my bare feet in the grass, and I breathe. This is what I fought for, not just a place, but a feeling, a chance to start over. Not alone, but together. End.